He spent a year becoming Jim Morrison, learned 50 songs, went to therapy afterward just to remember who Val Kilmer was. The actual surviving members of the Doors watched his performance and got chills because they genuinely forgot they weren't looking at their dead friend. And then he played Batman and got fired. Not because the movie flopped. Batman Forever made $336 million. He got fired because he cared too much, because he brought psychological depth to a Joel Schumacher superhero movie, and the director called him childish and impossible, because this Capricorn dared to treat a comic book character like a Shakespearean tragedy. And here's what gets me about his chart. His entire life is a study in what happens when a Capricorn chooses mastery over fame, craft over career, the work over everything else in the world. Wait till you see how his brother's death at 15 shaped everything that came after. And the throat cancer diagnosis, the one that took his voice, the very thing he'd trained his whole life to control, his chart predicted exactly how he'd handle it and how he'd get the last word anyway. If you're obsessed with understanding people through their charts, hit subscribe. Drop a like if you're ready for this story, and I genuinely want to know, would you want a Capricorn's uncompromising standards if it meant burning every bridge in your industry, or is the price too high? Comment your honest take, because this one's gonna make you think. So, Val Kilmer, born December 31st, 1959, New Year's Eve. Literally the last day of Capricorn season. If you know anything about astrology, you know that cusp babies often embody their sign to the extreme. And Capricorn at its most intense? That's someone who will climb the mountain no matter what it costs. We don't have his birth time, so no moon or rising to work with, but honestly, his sun sign alone explains everything you need to know about this man's life choices. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, the planet of time, discipline, karma, restriction, and mastery earned through suffering. Every single Capricorn placement carries this weight, this sense that nothing comes easy, nothing is given, everything must be earned through relentless grinding work. And when a Capricorn decides to master something, they don't just get good at it, they become it, they consume it. They won't stop until they've reached a level most people can't even imagine. Keep that in mind, because when we get to what he did for the Doors, and what it cost him, it'll make perfect sense. Val was born in Los Angeles, second of 3 sons. His father, Eugene, was an aerospace equipment distributor and real estate developer who made and lost fortunes. His mother, Gladys, was of Swedish descent. They divorced when he was 8. And here's the detail that changes everything about how you understand Val Kilmer. In 1977, his younger brother Wesley had an epileptic seizure and drowned in a hot tub. Wesley was 15, Val was 17. He later said that his family was never the same again. And for a Capricorn, loss doesn't just hurt, it fundamentally reshapes them. Saturn's influence means Capricorns have a complicated relationship with mortality from the start. They're the old souls of the zodiac. They understand endings before most people even notice beginnings. But losing a sibling at 17? That's the kind of formative tragedy that activates every shadow aspect of Capricorn. The seriousness, the intensity, the inability to do anything casually. Why would you waste a single moment when you've already learned that time can be stolen from anyone? The same year his brother died, Val got accepted to Juilliard, the youngest person ever admitted to the drama division at that point. 17 years old, already a prodigy, already carrying grief that would fuel everything that came after. He studied there alongside Kevin Spacey. They were actually friends in high school too, and both attended Chatsworth High. And Juilliard taught him something that would define his entire approach to acting. The craft is sacred. This isn't entertainment, this is art, capital A art, the kind that demands everything from you, the kind you give your whole self to. This is so textbook Capricorn it hurts. They don't do anything halfway, they don't phone it in. They build their craft like they're constructing a cathedral, stone by stone, decade by decade, with absolute devotion to getting every single detail right. Remember this foundation because it explains why Hollywood loved him and hated him in equal measure. His film debut was the 1984 comedy Top Secret, a spy spoof from the Airplane creators. Then Real Genius in 1985, where he played a charming genius. Both showed his range, his comic timing, his ability to command the screen. But the breakthrough came in 1986 with Top Gun. He played Iceman. Tom Cruise's rival, the cool, controlled, methodical pilot who plays by the rules. And here's the thing, Kilmer didn't even want the role initially. He didn't care about the film, the story didn't interest him, but director Tony Scott promised that Iceman would get more development than the original script allowed, so Kilmer signed on. Classic Capricorn move. He needed to know the work would be worth his time. He wasn't going to show up and sleepwalk through a shallow role just for a paycheck. That's not how Capricorns operate. They need the mountain to be worth climbing. Top Gun became a massive hit. Kilmer became a star. But stardom, that was never the goal. The work was the goal. And then came Willow in 1988, The Doors in 1991, and this is where everything about his Capricorn nature explodes into full view. Oliver Stone approached him for The Doors after seeing Willow. Stone thought Kilmer could play Jim Morrison. Kilmer agreed, but on his terms. He spent his own money, several $1,000s to create an 8-minute audition video. He performed as Morrison at various stages of his career. He filmed it at a rented house in Laurel Canyon with professional assistants. This wasn't an audition. This was a Capricorn proving he'd already done the work before anyone even offered him the job. For the role itself, he spent 6 months rehearsing Doors songs every single day. He learned 50 songs. 50! 15 of them appear in the actual film, and he sang them live over the original master tapes. The band's producer, Paul Rothchild, spent hundreds of hours with him, teaching him how Jim pronounced certain words, how he moved, how he thought, how he approached lyrics as poetry and revelation. John Densmore, the Doors drummer, said Kilmer gave him the creeps on set because he was so close to Jim. Actors, he said, they're weird. They transform their bodies, but here's what really gets me. Kilmer didn't just act like Morrison, he became him. He wore Morrison's actual leather pants. He requested that everyone on set call him Jim, not Val. If someone slipped and used his real name, he'd stay in character and not respond. He lost weight. He adopted the mannerism so completely that when the surviving band members saw footage, Ray Manzarek couldn't tell if he was watching Val or the real Jim. And after filming, Wrapped, Kilmer needed therapy, actual therapy, to get out of the character and remember who he was. This is Capricorn mastery taken to its logical extreme. They don't just prepare, they don't just practice. They climb inside the work and let it consume them, and when it's over, they have to claw their way back to themselves. Was it worth it? The band members themselves said he should have been nominated for an Oscar. Critics called it one of the best musical biopic performances ever committed to film. Rolling Stone gave it 4 out of 4 stars. Val Kilmer proved he wasn't just a movie star, he was a master. But this level of intensity, it comes with a price. 1993, Tombstone, Val Kilmer plays Doc Holliday, and he absolutely steals the entire film from Kurt Russell. This wasn't even the lead role, but Kilmer's portrayal became iconic. The wit, the danger, the tragedy of a dying man who refuses to let death take his dignity. Roger Ebert called it the definitive saloon cowboy of our time. That line, "I'm your Huckleberry," became immortal. Kilmer played Doc as someone who was already dying but still absolutely lethal. A man who knew his time was short and chose to spend it being loyal, being dangerous, being unforgettable. Watch how this pattern shows up again later in his actual life because it's almost eerie. Capricorns understand mortality. They work in the shadow of time, and Kilmer played that shadow perfectly. Kurt Russell later said that working with him was like watching someone completely serious about what they wanted to do. Even back then, before all the difficult reputation stuff, Russell could see that Val was different. He wasn't there to be a star. He was there to build something that would last. 1995, Heat. Kilmer holds his own against Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. Director Michael Mann later said he marveled at the range, the brilliant variability within the powerful current of Val's possessing and expressing character. This is the absolute peak of his career from an industry standpoint. A-list roles, critical respect, commercial success, and then Batman Forever. Same year. And here's where the Capricorn shadow side takes over. Joel Schumacher cast Kilmer as Bruce Wayne after Michael Keaton left the franchise. Schumacher had seen Tombstone. He knew Kilmer's reputation for being difficult, but figured those stories were exaggerated. They weren't. Or rather, they were true, but not for the reasons everyone assumed. Kilmer wasn't difficult because he was lazy or unprofessional. He was difficult because he cared too much. He brought method intensity to a superhero movie. He wanted to explore Bruce Wayne's trauma, his psychology, the weight of being Batman. Schumacher wanted camp and color and toy sales. They clashed constantly. Schumacher later said they got into a physical pushing match on set. He called Kilmer childish and impossible. Kilmer later admitted he behaved bizarrely and brazenly, but he didn't apologize for caring about the work. Batman Forever made $336 million. It was a massive hit, and Kilmer was gone. Sort of quit, sort of fired, depending on who's telling the story. Schumacher said he'd pray never to work with him again. George Clooney took over for Batman and Robin, and the Whisper Network in Hollywood started circulating the same message. Val Kilmer is difficult. Val Kilmer is impossible. Val Kilmer is not worth the trouble. This is the Capricorn trap. They have standards so high that anyone who doesn't meet them becomes an obstacle. They clash with authority not because they're rebellious, but because they can't respect people who aren't masters. They'll sacrifice relationships, opportunities, entire careers, because compromising the work feels worse than failure. Kilmer could have played the Hollywood game. He could have smiled at the press junkets and laughed at the director's jokes and accepted that Batman was a product, not art. But that's not who he was. That's not what his chart allowed him to be. The Island of Dr. Moreau in 1996 made everything worse. The production was a legendary disaster. Marlon Brando made impossible demands. The original director Richard Stanley got fired. John Frankenheimer took over and later said he didn't like Val Kilmer, didn't like his work ethic, and never wanted to be associated with him ever again. Reports said Kilmer burned a cameraman with a cigarette, though the details are disputed. The film bombed. And now, Hollywood had proof that Val Kilmer was too much, too intense, too demanding, too unwilling to just show up and be a movie star. Throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, his career shifted. He still worked The Saint in 1997, The Prince of Egypt in 1998, voicing Moses, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang in 2005, Spartan in 2004 with David Mamet, but the A-list roles dried up. He became, as one profile put it, the most unsung leading man of his generation. Roger Ebert had written that back in 1992, and it only became more true as time went on. The talent was undeniable. The mastery was obvious. But the industry had decided he wasn't worth the difficulty. And here's where Saturn's lessons get really intense. In 2014, Val noticed a lump in his throat. He ignored it at first. He was a lifelong Christian Scientist, raised to believe that diseases are errors of the mind and spiritual healing takes precedence over medical intervention. When he finally went to the doctor, when he started vomiting blood and couldn't pretend anymore, they told him it was throat cancer. Capricorns have this complicated relationship with the physical body. They push through. They endure. They believe willpower can overcome anything. And Christian Science reinforced that for Kilmer. He called it the suggestion of throat cancer, refusing to fully claim the diagnosis as his reality. But his children, Jack and Mercedes, weren't Christian Scientists. They begged him to get treatment. And Kilmer, for all his stubbornness about everything else, couldn't handle their fear. I just didn't want to experience their fear, he said. I would have had to go away, and I just didn't want to be without them. So he did chemotherapy, radiation, procedures that damaged his vocal cords. He needed a tracheostomy. And the voice that had sung 50 Doors songs, that had delivered some of the most memorable lines in Western film history, that had been trained at Juilliard and refined over decades of mastery, was reduced to a rasp. Something between a squeak and a voiceless roar, one journalist wrote. He could barely speak. He needed a feeding tube. The very instrument of his craft had been taken from him. This is Saturn's cruelest lesson. The plan of time takes away what you love most to teach you, that mastery isn't about the tools. It's about what you do when the tools are gone. And what did Kilmer do? He kept going. In 2020, he released his memoir, I'm Your Huckleberry. In 2021, he released Val, a documentary made from decades of personal footage he'd shot throughout his career. He'd been filming his own life since the beginning, a Capricorn documenting his own mountain climb. The documentary premiered at Cannes to critical acclaim. It won 2 Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, and it showed something the difficult reputation had hidden for years. Val Kilmer was never the villain of his own story. He was someone who loved acting more than fame, who chose mastery over convenience, who paid the price and kept climbing anyway. And then came Top Gun Maverick. Tom Cruise refused to make the sequel without him. "I'm not making this movie without Val," he told the producers. They found a way to include Iceman despite Kilmer's voice limitations. They wrote the character as having battled the same throat cancer Val had faced. Iceman communicates mostly through typing on a computer screen. And when he finally speaks one line, when he looks at Maverick and says, "It's time to let go," audiences in theaters sobbed. Tom Cruise cried while filming it. "He's such a powerful actor that he instantly became that character again," Cruise said. "You're looking at Iceman. I was crying. I got emotional 36 years after the original film, with his voice nearly destroyed, with his career having been written off for decades." Val Kilmer came back and delivered one of the most emotionally devastating scenes in a blockbuster film. The scene wasn't about dialogue. It wasn't about volume or projection. It was about presence, mastery, the ability to communicate through silence what lesser actors can't express with paragraphs. This is Capricorn's final form. When everything has been taken, when the mountain has crumbled, when Saturn has extracted every possible payment, what remains is the craft itself, pure, undiminished, earned through suffering that would have broken anyone who wasn't willing to keep climbing. Val Kilmer passed away on April 1st, 2025. He was 65 years old. The official cause was pneumonia, with throat cancer complications as contributing factors. He passed in his sleep at his Los Angeles home, the city where he'd been born on the last day of Capricorn season 65 years earlier. His legacy is complicated in the way all Capricorn legacies are complicated. He wasn't easy, he wasn't accommodating. He demanded from himself and everyone around him a level of dedication that most people found exhausting. But he was right. He was right about The Doors. That performance in Doors is one of the greatest in the history of musical biopics. He was right about Doc Holliday, still considered the definitive portrayal 3 decades later. He was right about taking Batman seriously, even if Hollywood wasn't ready. He was right that the work mattered more than the politics, even when the politics ended his A-list career. And in the end, when he had nothing left but a ruined voice and a body that had been through 2 tracheotomies and years of treatment, he was still right. He still showed up. He still acted. He still told his story on his own terms. Capricorns don't aim for the summit because they expect to enjoy the view. They climb because the climb itself is the point, the discipline, the dedication, the refusal to settle for anything less than total mastery, even when that mastery costs you everything the world says you should want. Val Kilmer spent his entire life proving that art is worth more than fame, that craft is worth more than convenience, that becoming someone completely Jim Morrison, Doc Holliday, Batman, Iceman matters more than being liked. His chart made him difficult. His chart made him brilliant. His chart made him the kind of actor who would learn 50 songs and need therapy afterward, who would clash with directors and burn bridges and choose small films over big paychecks because the work was better. And his chart made him someone who, even without a voice, could walk onto a film set 36 years after the original movie and make Tom Cruise cry just by being present. That's Capricorn, that's Saturn. That's what happens when you give yourself completely to mastery and let the mountain take everything else. I'm your Huckleberry.